ball. When the game started, the ball, for me, just went right down to the bottom and it stayed there. So what we did next was we went into block view and we set this up so that every time we would hit the edge, the ball would bounce. And so what we saw was that the ball was just going up and down, right, over and over again. So then we said, all right, well, in addition to bouncing, we also want to change the speed every time the ball hits the edge. And we want to change the heading. And we want to change the radius. And we want to change the paint color. Right, so every time that the ball hits the edge of the canvas, not only will it bounce, but we could also change properties with that bounce. Okay. And that's when we ran out of time. All right, so that's all we've done so far. Today I want to start by making changes to that enemy ball based on time. Right now all these changes are occurring because we hit the edge. What if you want to change, say, the speed and the heading based on time rather than a bounce? Well, that's pretty easy to do, but we do need a new component. So I need you to go out to Designer View, and if you come down to the sensor category, there's a sensor called a clock. And if you drag in a clock, what we can do is we can base those updates on time. So like every quarter of a second, or every half a second, or every second, we can have something occur on the screen. So we have the clock. Let's go ahead and rename it. This is going to be the enemy clock. So this clock is only for the enemy. If we want a clock for a countdown, we need a different clock. So it's important to name your clocks. All right, so this is going to be, again, the enemy clock. All right, for the enemy clock, there are some properties here. Do we want the timer to always be working? Yes. Do we want the timer enabled? Yes. What is the timer interval? How often should this fire? We're going to say 500 milliseconds. 500 milliseconds. All that means is that every half a second, something will happen. If we leave it at 1,000, it would be every 1 second.
Uh-oh.
All right, if we made it 5,000, it would be every 5 seconds. It's totally up to you, but for this, I'm going to make it 500. So every half a second, something will happen. Now, what will that something be? That's up to you. But what I'm going to do is I'll go into block view, I'll click on the enemy clock, and come up here to the top where it says when the enemy clock dot timer. This is basically whenever those 500 milliseconds pass and the timer fires, what do you want to happen? Well, what I want to happen is I want my speed to change. So I'm going to take speed out of here and put it in the timer. And I want the heading to change. So I'm going to take the heading and put that in. And then I'll put the radius change and the paint color change back into the bounce option. All right, so when the enemy ball hits the edge, it'll bounce, but it will also change the radius and the paint color. But every half a second, it's going to change the speed and the heading. All right, let's see what that looks like. It's just making it a little bit more difficult for the player because now, you know, the ball may be approaching the edge, but if it's a half a second, it's going to change direction before it gets there. And it's going to change speed. So you may be anticipating the ball to be in a certain location, but because it changes heading and speed based on time, now it's not going to be where you expected it to be. All right, makes it a little bit more interesting. So go ahead and run this and see what